You ever been super hyped for a game coming out, and when it finally comes out, it meets all your expectations, only for you to be supremely disappointed when a developer takes the game in a direction you weren't expecting? That's where I am with the Division 2 right now. It took me a while to get to the point where I could put my words into thoughts. I've been struggling to find the motivation to play this game, and yet with all the improvements the developer made in the sequel, how can I be less enthused to play this game than I was the first game at the same time period after launch? It wasn't until Ubisoft's E3 press conference and their segment on Division 2 that it really hit me. Massive and Red Storm, the two main developers, focused far too much on what didn't work in the first game and not enough on what actually did. So you're probably thinking, SloMo, what are you talking about? You were hyped for this game for the longest time. You were arguing with people on why this game was going to be so great. And when it came out, you gushed about this game like the biggest fanboy. How can you be saying this now? Well, here's why. Everything that I enjoyed about the first game is no longer present in the second. The first game provided a level of build diversity, the ability to create hybrid builds based off high-end gear and gear sets that simply hadn't been done in a loot shooter since Borderlands 2. The first game took chances. Some of them didn't hit their mark, but some absolutely nailed it. The Underground was a great content addition. Last Stand was an excellent blend of strategy, PvE, and PvP. And survival mode was frankly an experience few games have been able to match. Where is any of this in the Division 2? All we have is the main campaign and skirmish mode with 3 maps. So let's really get into it. Build diversity. There is none for the Division 2. Every build is only a slight variation from another. Everyone is running around with the same weapon talents, the same gear talents, and they're all DPS builds. There are no dedicated healers, no tanks, no buffs or debuff builds, and positively no valuable skill builds. The skills don't do enough damage to justify the loss of firearms or stamina it takes to buff them, and your skills still don't get the job done as quickly as using your guns would. Let's look at the Division 1 agent I use the most in his loadouts. I have a PvP and PvE build that are drastically different from one another. My Tactician build is a skill build where my turret can kill as many enemies as my agent can with his gun. Those Banshee and Dark Zone loadouts are only good for hunting rogues or surviving as one. This isn't even all the different builds that I have. On my other agents, my Reclaimer build could help me get a group that doesn't have the best builds through difficult content. My Deadeye Sniper build is actually worth having, unlike in Division 2, where one-shot sniper builds just get nerfed. Let's take a look at some game footage of my Tactician build at work. I'm rocking the Assault Turret and Support Station at the moment. I really could have gone with the Cluster Secret Mines for damage. I think I switched to that halfway through this mission, but that's not that important. But here you will see how my approach to combat has changed. I'm not rushing the enemies like I could with my Striker build. I'm paying attention to the placement of my turret and support station. Things I don't need to do in the sequel because the turret is useless and the support station isn't in the game. By the way, my turret auto-targets enemies instead of forcing me to target them. So instead of having to tell a turret to target an enemy and do pitiful damage, my turret does it all on its own, can kill enemies, and I can focus on the other enemies. Instead of having the support station in the sequel, they added a healing mod to all your skills. But you'll only really use the Chem Launcher for nearly all content and the Hive Restorer for the raid. Skill builds being worthless is a huge issue to me. And for many Division players who enjoy playing the Division in different and unique ways, it gets boring when everyone is using the same builds. Where is our equivalent to the Firecrest build? A gear set dedicated to healing. They don't exist. It makes half the skills you have pointless. It makes the majority of the loot you collect worthless. And the lack of a need to do the loot grind accentuates the issues with this content. And this is something that has been brought up to Massive before. Here's Terry from Red Storm at E3, announcing what's to come from now to early 2020 in their free content drops. And honestly, I'm just not enthused. Throughout this footage, you can see occasional shots at the crowd outside the first 2 rows. The rest of the crowd was on life support. Just being real. Episode 1 looks to be more story content for a game really light on story, not very good at story either, with a new mode that focuses on exploration. Of all things, exploration. When I say I want different content, I don't want exploration. Exploration isn't something many gamers are looking for in a loot shooter. Episode 2 features another raid, and considering how the first one turned out, I'm concerned about Master's ability to develop a raid that isn't geared towards just pleasing the PC audience. This was an issue even with the first Division game, as often they give access to a public test server for PC players, and their new content would drop and be a seamless experience on PC, yet a ton of issues on consoles because console players didn't get a chance to use a PTS server to iron those issues out. The first raid is just one big DPS check after another, and none of the loot you get from the raid, save an exotic assault rifle, really makes the experience worth playing after you beat it. Massive used to be known to make drastic changes to content due to the loud voices of the content creators within the community. They were wise to stop giving in to all of their demands, but sometimes their feedback is spot on. And in this issue with the raid, I would hope they improve on the next one the way they improved on each incursion in the first game. Episode 3 is the most intriguing, because Rogue Agent Keener is a good villain, but that isn't even coming out this year. The reaction at E3 is a very different response than the response they got to survival mode. This is me running a survival session, and it's still fun even to this day. You get dropped into the map with 23 other players. You don't have your current gear or weapons. You need to find clothes to keep yourself warm and survive. You have to avoid enemies early on, or pick and choose your battles. All the while, you're dying of an infection and only have an hour to live. You can use antibiotics and painkillers to buy yourself time, but you have to get the antivirals and get extracted out of the dark zone before your time runs out. This mode makes sure every run is unique, and with the implementation of a PvP mode, you have the added element of avoiding other agents or hunting them down and taking their stuff. Why don't we have anything like this in the Division 2? It doesn't have to be another survival mode, but it should be a different gameplay experience that removes all of the builds you've come to rely on, takes you out of your element, and forces you to play in a different way. One thing the Division 2 definitely got right was developing the game with the end game in mind. This was Ubisoft fixing a mistake they made with the first game, and I got no problems with that. My issue is after you reach World Tier 5, there isn't much else left to do, especially when you're not chasing any loot because all the loot sucks. You got dailies and weeklies of the same content you've done a million times, the same 3 PvP maps, and a raid that's only fun if you play on PC. Without build diversity, without unique play modes, this game simply isn't keeping my attention any longer. Every time I think about playing, I try to think of a reason to play, a reason to get back to the game and grind loot. Can I think of one thing to do that is different than my last play session? And I just don't have one. Hopefully Massive will provide one soon. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoy it, hit the like button, hit that subscribe button. If not, hey, hit the dislike button and tell me why in the comments below. I'm open to a discussion.